All right, you are live.
Okay, so it is Wednesday, July 27th. This is a virtual meeting of the Annapolis Environmental Commission. Currently, there is not a acting chair or vice chair, so I, Racine Hodo, city staff, am calling this meeting to order at 7:03 p.m. I have an agenda I'm sharing with you. What I did was I listed new business and Eric Lashinsky in a presentation that he's going to give, but he's not here yet. So what I would suggest is that we kind of skip to number 3, discussion and vote for a new commission chair and vice chair. And we can start that discussion. And once Eric is in, or Teresa Wellman, we can table the discussion until after their presentation. So Jeremy, would you like to start, or is there anyone here that would like to start this discussion?
Well, let me just jump in here, Racine. So we don't have a chair or vice chair, so we need to vote on both. And I think what we need to do, because we're almost done with 2023, is because this position usually runs a calendar year, is the person we vote for would finish out this year, because we only have a few months left, and then also be the chair for 2024. The chair, just so people know, I mean, we have a lot of new people on this commission. So, you know, lack of experience on the commission should not hold anyone back. We need someone to set the agenda, with the city staff, which would be Racine, who's our staff liaison, who runs the meetings. And I'm hoping we can continue to do this virtually, because that seems to work out best for everybody. And you know, make assignments where needed. Periodically have discussions with me and Racine about the direction of the commission, things that maybe should be working on. And all commission members will participate in drafting comments, drafting letters. When asked by the environmental committee or another committee to testify or submit comments, help with that. It's the workload is not just on the chair and the vice chair. The chair and the vice chair help guide the direction and run meetings and set agendas. And so the workload is not tremendous. We want to make sure that it's not, so people can take this position, leadership position, and get some experience in it. The vice chair does not necessarily have to come the chair the following year. That's just something that in some years that was done. We could find somebody else, but right now I know that I spoke with Jeremy and Janice, and both of them are interested in some sort of leadership role with the commission. I don't know if anyone else is interested. I don't see anybody jumping up and down.
Yeah, it's Mary Ann Marbury. I'm not interested.
How many members and openings do we currently have right now? I forget where we're at.
Okay, the commission is made up of 9 members, and currently there are 6 members. There are 4 of you here tonight, and then there's Bill O'Leary and Paul Murphy. So there are 3 positions that are still open. Hillary is currently speaking to someone about joining the commission, but I don't have any more details than that.
Yeah, I think Hillary's going to put her forward to be approved by the mayor. So we would have 6 of the 9 positions. I mean, sorry, 7 of the 9 positions filled.
And if there is anybody else who's interested in a leadership position, we have had discussion. I had a discussion with Jackie, and you know, I can do a certain amount, but it's not the it may not be the best year for me to do that. So if Mary Ann, you already said you're not interested. Linda, I don't know.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. No.
Linda is not.
Not, you said?
Not interested. I'm brand new. Still trying to figure out what this is all about.
That's how I feel.
Well, we have, you know, Jenny's new, Mary Ann's new, Linda's new. Jeremy is hasn't been on that long, but he's an old timer, I guess, compared to some people. Bill, Larry, and Paul are have been on for quite a while. But they have not been as consistent. I think their schedules just to prevent them from joining. They often have to join late. So I prefer perhaps that they not take on that role because we have to have someone that's a bit more consistent. I can't nominate anybody, you know, we're staff. We can talk to you and advise you and give you information, but the nominations have to come from within the commission and be voted on by commission members.
And I'll say I am willing to play the part, and agendas and the kind of forward motion of committees like this is something I do as part of my full-time job, just not as like a chair, more as like a support person. So I'm happy to do that because that's not a ton of work for me, but it's just when it comes to anything substantive, or if we are struggling to find ideas, I definitely would need help from not just the city staff, but also always open to ideas from others. If there's presentations we want to hear from the community or elsewhere, I probably don't have as extensive of networks as many of you do. So as far as populating the agenda with interesting or time relevant topics, definitely eager to receive ideas on that going forward. And as far as kind of the workload between meetings, like I said, the administrative churn of the agendas and everything is not a problem. It's I have 2 little girls under 3, so unfortunately I don't think the commitment really falls so much on evenings as much as it does during the workday, where I think I do have some flexibility to communicate with city staff or others. So I'm happy to play the role if someone nominates me, or if I can self-nominate, since it sounds like there's not a lot of other people angling or interested at this time. So
Jeremy, it's Mary Ann again. I'm happy to assist, take direction. So if you or Jenny need help with the agenda, or bringing people to meetings, I'm happy to assist with that. I just don't want to be in a lead position.
You can self-nominate, Jeremy, if no one's going to nominate you.
Yeah, I was going to nominate Jerry Hansen as our new chair of the committee.
I second that nomination for Jeremy.
All right, Racine, take a vote.
Hey, this is Bill O'Leary. Sorry, I had some audio issues.
Oh, hey, Bill.
I only caught the tail end of that, but yeah, I second the nomination of Jeremy Hansen as the new chair.
thanks, Bill, just in time.
Okay, so he's been nominated. I'm not sure how to do this. And it's been seconded. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I
Okay, Jeremy Hansen.
You have to ask, are there any dissenters, because we're on audio.
Okay, does anyone not agree with this vote? Okay, Jeremy Hansen, you are the new chair of the Annapolis Environmental Commission. We can move forward from here tonight.
No, we have to vote on vice chair, nominations and vote.
Oh, I apologize.
And so what was Jenny, you were open to it? I forget where you
Yeah,
were.
I think the chair was going to be, I wasn't ready to quite take on the chair role, but Bill just showed up, so I want to give him the chance to weigh in on this.
Oh
Bill,
no, I think you would do a great job as vice chair.
Well, I
So-
will
so-
move to nominate Jenny as vice chair.
And I second that nomination.
There's been a motion to make Jenny Janis the Annapolis Environmental Commission's vice chair. That motion has been seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, does anyone disagree with this motion? Okay, so we now have Jenny Jansen, Janice, as our the Annapolis Environmental Commission's new vice chair. So welcome aboard, both of you, as in your roles. And now I think we can move forward.
Yeah, please, Racine, notify Hillary Rafkovich of the new chair and vice chair, and make sure she updates our website with not only the chair and vice chair, but our new members.
Okay.
So Bill, we were just saying that we have 6 members now. We have 3 open spots, but Hillary is moving someone forward to the mayor for confirmation. So after that, we'll have 2 empty spots on the commission.
Okay.
And just to be clear, then this is for the remainder of this year and 2024 is what we had discussed earlier.
Yes.
And I guess if I'm the chair, I run the rest of the meeting, but I think we only have a couple of agenda items. Did Eric join us?
Eric is not here, but Teresa Wellman is here, and he said in his email, I think that Teresa could start, and when he joins, he'll take over.
Okay, great. Well, go ahead. If you want to introduce Teresa or Jackie, I'll pass the ball.
Yeah, let's get Teresa on it, and she can introduce herself and she can get going with the presentation.
Good evening. I'm Teresa Wellman. I'm Chief of Community Development for the City of Annapolis. And we have a whole team of people. I don't know if you have them all on, but it's our consultants for the Choice Neighborhoods Project, which we're going to discuss tonight. So I don't know how you let them in.
I can admit them now. I didn't know that you were all with the same items.
Right. So this is the Eastport Choice Neighborhoods Initiative.
Yeah, and Racine, quick, you need to stop sharing your screen then.
I was going to do that. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Whoops, something happened here. Okay. There we go. Okay, I think all our team's here now. So what we're here to talk about is the Eastport Choice Neighborhoods Initiative Project, which is revitalization of the city's public housing community. And as some of you may already know, 2 years ago, the Housing Authority, in partnership with the city, was awarded a very competitive $450,000 grant through the Choice Neighborhood Program offered by HUD, or the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, to begin the process of revitalizing the area. This site is also adjacent to our ongoing Hawkins Cove Restoration Project, which is separately funded but coordinated with this larger project. So through a very intensive community-led process that included both public housing residents and residents of the surrounding neighborhood, we've developed a draft transformation plan, which we need to submit to HUD at the end of November. And your input would be greatly appreciated. So our team is here, and I'm going to ask each one of them to introduce themselves, starting with Ray Parks, who is our consultant from EJP. And if you want to go ahead, Ray, and then everybody, however you want to do it with your team.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Ray Parks. I'm with the EJP Consulting Group. We're happy to be here today to give you an update on this plan. With me is Matthew Fitzsimmons, who is also part of our team, and he's actually going to drive the presentation on behalf of our team, and I'll help facilitate questions. And I think the Housing Authority, Melissa, I think, is on, Teresa.
Yes, she is. Yes, she's there.
So I'm punting to her then to the next piece of the introduction.
Hello, Melissa Maddox Evans, Executive Director of the Housing Authority, City of Annapolis. So we're very excited about this project and partnering with the city, and excited to explain the different aspects of the project to you all today. We've been thoroughly engaged in this process for almost 2 years now, and we're, like I said, excited to move forward. We have Asim Nagam, our Development Director, online with us today. And I believe that's it from the HACA side.
Hello, everyone. Nice to join the meeting this evening.
All right, great. I think that covers our introductions. Again, I'm Matthew Fitzsimmons. I'm an architect and planner, a part of a consultant team. And I'm gonna try to be as brief as possible so we can have more of a discussion and get some feedback. There's a lot of things that are packed into this planning process that we probably won't touch on, but we'll try to get to the I guess more salient points for this conversation this evening. Let me see if I can flip slides. Hopefully everyone can see the screen.
Yes.
So we kind of proposed just a quick agenda. We're going to talk real quick about the transformation plan updates. This may be new to a lot of people on this call tonight. Hopefully, maybe some of the commission was present at one of our many public outreach meetings, or participated in the steering committee meeting. If you did, we definitely appreciated the input through the process. And then we'll go on to like a second point here, just kind of review how this plan was developed to date, and then take questions and answers at the end. And again, this is, as you can see by the team members here on the call, it was clearly a joint effort between the city and the Housing Authority of Annapolis. So the plan update. As Teresa said, this was a 2-year public process, and we're almost getting to the end. We had numerous points of contact with the residents of Eastport Terrace and Harbor House, as well as the surrounding neighborhood. And with the Choice Neighborhood Initiative, which is a planning process that was developed from HUD, we are not just looking at replacement of housing, but looking at the aspects of what makes a great neighborhood. So we're looking at the physical components of the neighborhood. We're talking about the services to support the housing residents at the housing site. And then it's also that third tier, that third leg of the stool is the actual creating quality housing. But through this process, we came together and we listened and we developed a vision statement. We had a lot of engagement through postcards, through conversations. And what really rose to the top was this theme of one Eastport for everyone. So that trying to really integrate the redevelopment of the HACA property back into kind of the Eastport neighborhood that surrounds it. I mean, there were a lot of specific items that people were interested in advocating for, from just washers and dryers in the units, to really looking at how do we create a plan that really brings people together, makes people feel connected, and really provides access to everyone. And so again, this planning process developed a set of 3 interconnected goals, and we're not going to really touch on all of the strategies under these goals, but the goals really, again, per kind of the CNI, the Choice Neighborhood process, really looking at how do we invest in the families, particularly the families of the public housing residents, reconnecting people and places. Under this goal, we're really trying to address how do we improve the neighborhood and make the redevelopment feel integrated within Eastport. And then the last one is looking at a redevelopment that's equitable and sustainable. And that's really focused on the housing plan itself, and how do we recreate the housing site to be more sustainable, more equitable, and welcoming. This is a really important slide, particularly as it relates to the housing. The goal here is to have one-for-one replacement of all of the affordable housing units that are there today. This is really critical, particularly in places like Annapolis, where affordable housing is very scarce. And so again, we're going to have a one-for-one replacement, and that is replacing the 357 residents that are there. But at the same time, the strategy is to really create more of an inclusive, integrated community. And so we're looking at incorporating new housing to really entice more of a mixed income community, to really help diminish the concentration of poverty in one place. So we're trying to bring in new households, various levels of households, from workforce housing to market rate, to really be integrated with the replacement units that are there. A common theme that we heard throughout this process is really looking to have a diverse housing stock here to help support, the changing lifestyles of residents and families, from a young family with kids, small kids, to perhaps aging in place for seniors who may not want a house that has stairs within it, maybe looking for something to downsize to and accommodate their lifestyle. And then we were also looking at off-site opportunities. Land is scarce. I think that's going to be a common theme in this discussion tonight, that it becomes very challenging to pack all of our needs into the site. So we looked at some off-site opportunities to really help create the right mix of incomes and housing types in the Eastport area. So real quick about the site today. So this is what the site looks like today. The shaded colored boxes represent the housing units that are there today. And essentially there's two types of housing types. There's the garden apartments that are up here, if you can see me pointing to that. And then a cluster of townhouses and some corner, like walk up, or I should say ground level flats. And that's down in the lower corner. And that's the Eastport Terrace, and then Harbor House is the garden apartments up above. One of the big distinguishing features is that this is kind of a super block. There's only one street, Madison Street, that goes through the neighborhood and gives addresses to these buildings. And then the open spaces that are there today, they're really embedded deep behind the housing units, out of sight from the general public. So as we were going through this process, we were looking for redevelopment, urban design strategies to help both reposition the open spaces and streets, but to do that in a way that the streets are more interconnected. It gives buildings front doors. It creates opportunities to have eyes on the street, eyes on the open spaces, and then to place those open spaces in locations that really help foster relationships between the neighbors around and the community within this property, allowing those spaces to feel welcoming to everybody. Again, real quick before we leave this slide, again, this is kind of a capture of with the bedroom types, the mixes that are there today, and just kind of want to identify that we, as one of the design challenges or constraints that are there today, there is a lack of accessible units. So getting back to that housing diversity, we're trying to improve how many accessible units are going to be there in the future, but also creating unit types that expand the potential for accessible or fair housing units. This is the framework diagram. This has been vetted through a design charrette. We had over 6 groups at the design charrette develop their own plan, and we began to merge the common themes together to get to this kind of proposed concept framework plan. This plan represents about 600 to 650 dwelling units overall. So again, you can see the increase in the amount of housing units here. And again, the importance here is the one-for-one replacement, trying to create enough housing so we can preserve those replacement units. One of the big themes in the design charrettes that was common to among many of the individuals who participated is trying to create that central open space, the kind of park space that can be shared by the entire Eastport community, and not just the housing residents, but also looking at reconnecting some of the streets into the neighborhood and making this redevelopment more walkable, pedestrian oriented, and easily accessible to the open spaces. And I'm just going to go through a couple of slides that kind of talks about some of the elements of the plan. It's not just about housing. This redevelopment is looking at creating a mixture of uses, non-residential uses with the residential uses. And again, trying to think about creating that more walkable community. Again, trying to get some uses that are important for daily existence. The Early Childhood Education Center located here in Dot 5, the orange shaded area, bringing that into the neighborhood so families don't have to get kids on a bus or get kids in a car and travel out of their way. Trying to make this as convenient and as great of an opportunity for families, so mom and dad can get to work, where your child is, and they're getting great quality education to get them ready for school. But also looking at community-oriented spaces along Madison Street. Again, Madison Street is kind of our spine street, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But clustering some retail options. We heard that everybody really wants a grocery store. There's a lot of programmatic site planning, physical planning challenges with a grocery store, but the intent here is to provide some retail space so that we can find the right tenant to help support the delivery of healthy food within the community. But also looking at spaces, retail spaces, community-oriented spaces that could also provide a doctor's office or counseling services for the residents here at the redevelopment site. And then furthermore, fitness is important. There's the community center that's there today with the swimming pool, the gymnasium. And so we're looking at replacing those important elements within this redevelopment. And you can see number 2 here. It's kind of a small pavilion type building with the replacement basketball court, indoor basketball court and pool facility and fitness space. The plan does look beyond the boundaries of the housing site. And one of those elements in kind of the housing oriented goals is looking at coordinating with finding resources and providers to help either homeowners in the neighborhood or landlords who to help upgrade their homes to continue to support having quality housing in the neighborhood, but also with the thinking that some of those improvements would lead to energy efficiency of those homes, upgrading insulation, improving the types of windows that are in the homes to improve the comfort, but also the efficiency of these homes. So one of the rec strategies that we're looking through now is, again, trying to link those resources and providers to the neighborhood around the housing redevelopment site. And then getting back to the housing site, again, social connections was really important. I think when we think about these connections, we're also thinking about some of the environmental features that'll be within some of these open spaces. So beyond the central park space, we were also looking at trying to create a kind of constellation network of smaller open spaces that are also inviting to the neighborhood. And you can see many of these spaces along President Street, kind of having an outward focus to the neighborhood, but also being framed by housing units and streets to really help accentuate the importance of having eyes into those spaces. And these are just kind of some images of what some of the programming thoughts were for some of those smaller spaces. In this diagram, what is represented in that kind of yellowish color represents kind of that sidewalk network, streetscape network that's linked to those open spaces. And of course, the importance of the Hawkins Cove project, which sits here, linking that back as kind of an open space feature. But we're also advocating in this planning process for an improved trailway connection, shared use path connection to Truxton Park further to the west, to really make that connection shorter for pedestrians and cyclists, and not having to rely on buses or driving to get around the neighborhood to Truxton Park. And again, the big focus of the redevelopment, as advocated by a lot of folks, was to have kind of a central park space, a space that has opportunity for recreation, anchored by the early education, the fitness facility, as well as locating transit into the space. So we're actually looking at relocating the bus stop that's currently at the edge of the development over on President Street. We're actually looking at relocating that more central at the Central Park, having transit very accessible to many of the amenities, making the boarding or unboarding off a shuttle very convenient with daily needs of visiting a doctor after work or after school, or picking up the kids after work. Some of the features that we've kind of planned into it, and again, this is at a high level concept plan. We have not gotten into engineering. We haven't gotten into a lot of the things that would come as we advance this plan along, that gets into more of the technical engineering, mass grading, utility, infrastructure design, and ultimately integrating that with the landscape and stormwater management. But we did take a cursory look at LEED ND checklist. We're hitting kind of the certification level of LEED ND as kind of desired by the CNI process. And a lot of that attributes to location. This redevelopment being in a great walkable location. Improving street connectivity has enhanced our LEED ND. And for those who don't know, ND is the neighborhood development. So that's the kind of US green building kind of checklist for neighborhood development. And again, looking at the buildings that are here would all qualify or be required to follow the Annapolis standards, as well as, or go beyond that to exceed green building standards for the individual buildings. We're up against Spa Creek. So with this project, we essentially limited our limit of disturbance away from Spa Creek and up the hill to avoid any possible chances for flooding or storm surges into the property. Again, the spa, the waterfront project along Spa Creek is one of those opportunities to really create more of that kind of layering of natural systems to help buffer flooding. But again, our development is pulled back up the hill and out of that forested area along the waterfront. Urban heat was talked about in the process. We have some street sections that we can look at. We felt really strongly that we want to create streets that have excellent opportunity for trees to thrive in this location, and of course looking for native trees and a variety of trees within the neighborhood. So if there's ever a blight or some kind of disease that may attack a specific species of tree, I think we're trying to encourage a diversity of native trees to kind of ward off that and preserve as much tree canopy as possible over the long haul. And then, of course, in terms of resiliency, we're looking, we feel strongly that the community center or the gymnasium would really be a place of refuge in the event of a hurricane and power outage, that they would have the ability to have backup power and support and access, to water and things. So people have a place to go to as they kind of rebuild after an event, or a place to go to as a community to come together and be resilient in the face of ever-changing climate issues. So this is kind of a diagram overlaid on the development plan, really kind of focusing on the green network. Again, the green network is really tied into kind of the open space programming strategy. But what we're trying to do here again, this is very preliminary, but looking at where we would start to overlay kind of our stormwater facilities. And in this diagram, we're really just looking at kind of the bioretention, rain garden strategies throughout. And by no means is this exhaustive. I think there are plenty of good opportunities to enhance it and quantify it as we start to drill into details. But again, I think the stormwater management is going to be integrated with the landscape design. We're creating. Unfortunately, we have to deal with parking. So parking provides opportunities for creating islands and medians within the parking field for stormwater management. But I think there's opportunities to look at, which is not indicated on this diagram, but opportunities to look at creating pervious paving standards for edge conditions of parking lots where the cars are parked and maybe not where the drive aisle is, but looking at multiple materials to help reduce the imperviousness of the redevelopment. I do want to just point out, like we are trying to preserve the forested area around Hawkins Cove, and again, the limit of our project disturbance is really kind of where the existing HACA office is. So we're trying to keep out of any kind of encroachment into the existing forest along Hawkins Cove, and letting that stand as kind of an environmental feature and asset for the community, and leverage the Hawkins Cove project with this redevelopment. Madison Street is an important street that runs through the site. We see this as kind of a strong pedestrian boulevard, but we also see this as a great kind of greenway opportunity to bring into the site and really reinforce the public realm, as well as develop kind of stormwater management and shading strategies for the neighborhood. But we are in the critical areas that played a kind of really shaped the way we think about this redevelopment. A lot of the open space, park space is really pushed closer to Hawkins Cove to improve, to really allow for more pervious surfaces closest to Hawkins Cove, in addition to all the stormwater management features that would be needed for this type of development. And so the bold red line is the outer edge of the critical areas boundary from Hawkins Cove. Looking outside of the redevelopment, so that the overall neighborhood, as we were looking at it, really looked at kind of bounded by Bay Ridge Avenue, Adams Street, to Spa Creek, and then really over to Truxton Park. The housing redevelopment site is this kind of browner shade of color here. But we in this process, we really wanted to look at how do we create more walkability access through the neighborhood to allow residents of the redevelopment and within the neighborhood really get everywhere. In Annapolis, the sidewalks, there's a lot of gaps in the sidewalk. Sidewalks are small and tight, and there's infrastructure that's in the way for making sidewalks usable. So we kind of highlighted three yellow strips here that we felt are kind of key corridors that we could maybe focus on building that kind of sidewalk infrastructure out to make better connections. One is looking at tying in to a lot of the good improvements that were made along Bay Ridge Avenue in terms of the cycle, the bike lanes, but also fulfilling that missing gap of sidewalk, which is between the firehouse and the Methodist church here, to make this a sidewalk connection complete all the way to the elementary school. Allowing opportunities for the walking school bus to happen in a safe way. The connection along Madison Street from the neighborhood, from the housing redevelopment over to the Eastport Shopping Center, is very challenging. There's a lot of different widths of the right of way, but we think we can start with some tactical strategies to enhance the safety of pedestrians. I feel like every time I'm at the site, I see people with wheelchairs or strollers, or with, you know, with the carts with groceries or whatever they've purchased at the shopping center, walking down the middle of the street. And that's really just because the sidewalks are narrow and there's utility poles that are in the way and a lot of different curb cuts that impact it. So looking at that segment as an opportunity to improve pedestrian connection to daily services. And then the last one that we wanted to stress in terms of building out that pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure is that shared use pathway to connect over to Truxtun Park. Currently, the only way to walk there would be down to Hilltop Lane and up Primrose Road. So looking at creating kind of a landscape experience that can get people there very quickly, make it enjoyable, make it a part of the fitness and experience to get from home over to Truxtun Park for all the great features and amenities that are there today. And we'll talk about some of these in section as we go through the plan. Again, getting back to the importance of pedestrian connectivity, one of the big elements of this planning process was this community gateway improvement. And this is a grant that HUD gives for each planning project called an early action activity. We vetted ideas with residents, with neighbors, and so the ideas that really rose to the top was really looking at a gateway opportunity at Madison President Street to both celebrate the renewal opportunity of this project, but also to address some real issues of traffic calming, improving access to transit, and improving access for the pedestrian across the street. So these are some very some ideas here, some tactical urbanism ideas to help address Madison and President Street in the short term. If Eric is on, he can speak to the process and where we're at now, but I believe the city is in negotiations with an artist to help implement this strategy for the intersection of Madison and President Street. And then extending out Madison Street is really looking at some other strategies. Again, here's the intersection of our early action activity that's going to be happening very soon. So hopefully you'll be able to join that process and be a part of that creation of ideas for this intersection. But also looking at what are some low-hanging fruit opportunities along Madison Street to the shopping center, improving the intersection at Bay Ridge, just providing pedestrian refuge there really helps allow people to feel safe and get across the street. Where there's opportunities in the street width for traffic calming, can we introduce traffic calming that not only provides opportunity for shade, but also for stormwater management and treatment locally at those spots. And again, this is kind of a tactical approach, looking at little things that we can implement before and allowing, I guess, the city to really think hard about the whole section holistically and how that might be improved in the long term. And then going back into the site, again, what was important is really creating pedestrian-oriented streets. So Madison Street was important coming in. The edge of President Street is important as it frames the redevelopment. And we'll look at ways that we're addressing the edge of President Street in terms of creating more green space that's usable for residents and pedestrians, but also creating new streets within the neighborhood that provide stormwater management and shading opportunities, and really using these streets to connect open spaces and buildings, allowing this to feel like a very welcoming place for anyone to come and visit. And you can see the difference here. This is kind of the proposed network, and I know we're not diagramming the existing network, but it's really just one street and a lot of surface parking. And again, all of those open spaces are tucked behind the buildings and kind of out of sight. So again, trying to build up that network of open space and streets to improve the sense of safety and community. my mouse is stuck. There we go. So again, the streets are important. So this is kind of a cross section of Madison Street. This is kind of how it is today. You can see there's a lot of parking lots, trash up against the public right of way. The street has a lane going each way and some parking. The sidewalks are relatively narrow and tight along the street, and the buildings are really pushed way back. And so there's kind of this lack of natural surveillance from the buildings to the street. And what we're trying to do is rethink that street section, bring the buildings closer so we have more engagement between people and the public realm of the street. But looking at creating wider, deeper green strips along the curb to allow for stormwater management, but also to give enough soil volume to allow trees to kind of grow naturally and safely to get to that canopy size that we all really want for shade. In addition, we need the sidewalks to be a little bit bigger here. We want them to be a little bit bigger. So kids who can kind of use that or adults could use that as both pedestrian zone and a bike zone for the short distance through the neighborhood, just kind of creating that extra safety zone there for cyclists who may not feel comfortable out in the street, but at least in this zone, it starts to engage with some of the buildings. And again, where we have the buildings along Madison Street, we're looking at creating non-residential uses at the street level. So really creating that kind of activation, either with community or retail space at the street level to, again, reinforcing the eyes on that space. And then with President Street, kind of similar strategies, looking at, you can see the section up above. It's an interesting section. I won't go into too much detail, but looking at ways to create more stormwater management opportunities on our side, the housing authority side of President Street, and then looking at repositioning buildings so they have kind of compatible setbacks with the buildings across from it, that creating a little bit more lawn space for those units there along President Street that have direct access out to the sidewalk. And again, creating a little bit deeper of a green space, so kind of taking the sidewalk off of the curb and then inboarding it behind kind of the green strip and allowing that green strip to be depressed, capture water, and give us enough soil volume for those trees. And then again, we talked earlier about the importance of having some offsite opportunities to help kind of create a balanced community with the needs that we need to get to that mixed income community. So this is the exhibit, kind of a working diagram of the Spa Road site. Again, we see great opportunity to partner with the city with this property to create some housing at Spa Road. And again, the way that we envision this is locating those buildings and that the infrastructure to support those buildings up high on the hill, keeping it away from the tributary that feeds the Spa Creek flowing down to the lower right, and then creating opportunities to open up recreational opportunities that kind of feed into the existing fields and really help reknit that pathway, that existing kind of trail system from Spa Creek over to Truxton Park off the lower right-hand corner of the page and all the way up to connect to the existing trails that gets you to Bates Athletic Center. And so, does this project create some opportunities for, meeting, staging, bike repair, cooling space along the way? And again, creating opportunities for mixed uses as well as mixed income development on the site. So is this a spot that could have some retail that could feed into the recreation and the pathway systems that are crossing through the site? And before we open up the Q&A, I just want to kind of take a step back and just remind the commission about how this plan was developed. Again, this is a multi-phase process looking at three major elements: the neighborhood around the housing site, the housing redevelopment site itself, and then looking at the people, the residents that are there, and how do we improve their lives with services and needs do they need to really create a more holistic neighborhood and housing redevelopment. Again, we started over almost 2 years ago. We've gone through an assessment period, the visioning we talked about earlier. We've developed a series of strategies into the report that work with the housing redevelopment plan. And then we're at this point now where we're implementing. And we will be submitting that plan, as Teresa said, at the end of November back to HUD. There have been a lot of people who've been involved. Again, the city and the housing authority were the lead applicant, co-applicants on this process. We had a steering committee. And then underneath the steering committee, a lot of people participated in the task force. We had a lot of residents who worked as community connectors to help bring more people into the dialogue. And we had task force that really focused on specific agenda items for housing or the neighborhood or the people. We had very specific meetings to talk about crime and safety. And so a lot of that input has happened in this process, and that's how we've got to the development plan. And again, just to wrap up, again, a lot of involvement that's happened, lots of stakeholders. We've had 17 resident community events, 2 of which were very large scale events, a design shred and visioning session. And we looked to get the young residents involved in this process too. We had the youth were very inspirational in what they were envisioning for the site, and I think that really helped a lot of people add more vision and more ideas to the site, and very thankful to have those kids invested in this process. And so with that, we can open it up for questions and answers. I can go back to a slide if we want to talk about specific points. I don't know if Eric has jumped on, if he had any additional comments to add.
Could you go to the plan, one of the plan views?
Sure. This be sufficient?
I am here.
Hey,
Thanks,
Eric.
Matthew.
Yeah.
You did a great job. I don't have anything else to add. I know there's going to be questions.
I have a few questions unless somebody else wants to go into it. Okay. First off, I want to acknowledge the extensive amount of work that was done to get to this point. So, I commend you on that, and good job getting to this much of a resolution, a resolved plan, or framework plan, I should say. So I want to start off by saying that, but of course I do have some comments.
Sure.
So I just made some notes, so it might be bouncing around, but I have a couple questions first. The first is, how tall are the buildings? I said, especially the building by Spock, Hawkins Cove. What is that anticipated to be?
Yeah, so again, we're looking at diversity of housing types. So we have a range of housing, range of scale. And one of the drivers of the plan that a lot of consensus was built around is clustering the taller buildings around the central park and locating them away from the context of the neighborhood. And so I'm going to answer the question kind of in a roundabout way, but along President Street, we have lower scale buildings. So mostly 2 and 3 stories. These little kind of walk-up apartment buildings are 3-story buildings with townhouses that are generally 2-story in between. Once we get to the park, we're really looking at 4-story buildings. And then the community building here next to number 4 is a 1-story kind of pavilion. This building specifically that you pointed out does have a basement condition. We did kind of have a conversation about, reusing Hack as office, repositioning it. It just wasn't feasible in terms of its footprint, but its site footprint really created an opportunity for us to build off of. So essentially, we want to use that footprint, which has kind of a basement condition already, use that to get parking under the footprint of the building to reduce that level of imperviousness and get it under the building itself. And so that's a 4-story building sitting on top of some parking right there. It's dynamic location. It's got perched views of the wooded area, but also kind of holds the corner, the distant corner of the park space as well.
And I know there's supposed to be a mixture of income levels on the in the housing. Is that kind of thought through here on these building types or not? Or is that like the second phase?
Yeah, every building is going to be mixed. There's not one building will have, we're not housing or concentrating all the replacement units in one building. The intent is to be mixed.
Okay.
Ideally it's mixed throughout. I guess some of the lower scale buildings that, the townhouses might have a couple extra market rate next to the replacement units, but for all intents and purposes, it's mixed throughout, and it's mixed through each of the phases too. And this is going to be a multi-phased development process. It's not all going to get built out as once.
But I did I would like to add with regards to the type of housing, irrespective of the income of the particular family, all of the housing, the quality and style of the housing will be the same. And so there will be no distinction as far as that's concerned.
Yeah. Again, it's that division that it all feels like market rate housing for everyone.
And how did the critical area affect the framework plan?
Well, we really had to push a lot of the open space towards Hawkins Cove. So I think some of the big diagrams that we started out with, we really wanted central space kind of like over here. So a lot of that had to gravitate back in that direction. So you can kind of see, beyond the critical areas line, there's a lot more hardscape outside of that, and trying to create as much park space, open space closer to to Hawkins Cove.
Okay. So I'll get into just a few comments. I noticed that, and it makes sense on President Street, the character of the fabric being proposed is similar to what is on the other side of President Street. But I do wonder about the proposed connection at the back on Van Buren Drive, because the single family residential neighborhood there, it's not, when you cross over, you're then entering this completely different fabric. It doesn't feel like it should be like it's connected or reflective of trying to connect to that urban fabric. So I think, I'm not sure I have looked at this plan and talked about that connection, and I wonder about that because you already have 4 or 5 different access points to President Street, and Van Buren Drive just goes to President Street. So it's not taking you to another throughway or another. I just don't see the advantage to breaking up the character of that neighborhood with that connection when it doesn't get you to a different throughway from a traffic perspective. So I
kind of disagree. I think the more connectivity, the better. I think the way the framework lays out, it gives you opportunities in the future to make that connection. From a pedestrian standpoint, you're walking a dog, or your kids, making that connection is awesome. It really breaks down the scale of the neighborhood. It allows everyone who lives south of along Van Buren access to the park space, which is really the intent of the plan, is to bring people into this space to use it, to create more eyes on the street and on the open spaces, to make it feel safe. And that's really the intent of that connection. And there's really, because of the super block configuration and the historic patterns of development, you don't have any other connections along this whole stretch. So you have all of these homes down here that if they could get that pedestrian walk over, look how convenient that is to get to that open space for, you know, after school programming, opportunities to have pickup sports and things like that in the field, or even connections to Hawkins Cove, which is a bigger public asset.
I mean, I think a pedestrian connection could make sense, but I don't think a vehicular connection makes sense. And I know others in that neighborhood agree with me on that one. So perhaps again, the pedestrian connection could make sense. But again, the vehicular, not so sure, especially with the struggle for parking. If that is a space that accessible by vehicles in order to use those amenity spaces, it seems like it's better to walk there than to drive there. So I just want to log that comment. I know that I'm not alone in that feeling from that neighborhood. Especially since there's not a real consideration for connecting the fabric type to type. It's a harsh it's going to feel like a harsh transition from single family neighborhood to parking lot and larger kind of aggregated multifamily buildings. So, and then
I think that transition happens a lot. So I'm not so concerned about the scale issue. I think there's multiple ways to mitigate traffic. But I think the priority is to enable a framework to make that connection when there's consensus built around doing it. But really, the pedestrian thing, the cyclist is really important to get through there. Again, we would encourage people to get out of the car.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I mean, but we definitely have an area here where it could be more bikeable if the conditions were friendlier. So I don't disagree with you on that one. So then the other, let me see if that's another. And I imagine it was a cost issue, but garages. Does that make sense? I mean, it seems like there could be a lot of impervious cover removed. If there was, garage access, which would definitely upscale and change the character of what would be proposed.
Yeah, garage parking spaces cost a lot of money. And when these projects kind of come together, the resources that are needed, we really need to diversify how we get those resources. So it really makes it challenging when we have to build structured parking. It starts to become a trade-off of the amenities, right? So we're trying to balance it. We do have structured parking in 2 of the buildings, but the other couple buildings, we're looking at surface parking. We don't, because of the mixed income approach, we're looking at having more of a tailored approach to parking. Not when we looked at the actual neighborhood there today, the 357 units that are there today, the parking capacity was maybe at 25%. So we're trying to reduce the amount of parking that we provide on site and trying to match parking demands for market rate units as well. So it's kind of a blended average across the site to kind of help mitigate how much surface parking, how much structured parking that we need. Just trying to get it right.
Yeah, and my thought was so that's great to hear that some of them have structured parking. I think, I understand the limitations in cost, but I do think that this is the time to be a little ambitious. And I wonder if in the townhomes, there isn't an opportunity for even just one car, just to help wherever we can to get some of the parking met, and then potentially to have parking spaces for people who are coming to this area if we are going to have amenities that are, people are going to want to come to.
Yep. Yeah, and
Um,
we've also, it's not just the residential parking that we're calculating, it's the non-residential too. So that's all been blended. But
Okay.
yeah, if we could get a developer who would like to do townhouses within the building footprint, that would be great.
mhm, mhm.
And the
Um,
footprint allows for that. There's enough space there to make that happen too.
yeah, I would, if there's a way to somehow list that or have it as a, just to document it somehow, that'd be great. And I do think, the city is trying to do a lot with bike infrastructure, and I think it would be a missed opportunity to not have that infrastructure shown in the cross sections. Again, just this is the time to dream. This is the time to set the goals, especially on Madison Street, and I would even dare to say on President Street, even just for that little short part of it that will be affected. I think that the more we see that kind of thing on the plans that are being proposed, just across the board, the better.
Yeah, we've annotated that in the neighborhood plan of where we're kind of leveraging the city's bike master plan.
Okay. Yeah.
But
yeah.
yes, I think that's important to keep reminding people of that.
Yeah, and especially to have it in the graphics on the cross sections.
Mhm.
So, and then my last bit of question or comments is really about I recognize the ability for stormwater to be managed in these interstitial spaces, but also especially in a plan that's being built in a phased manner, having a little bit more width to those spaces and continuous nature to some of those spaces would help to really portray the intention of and so one of the things that I'm looking at in particular is, there with the line that is, I believe on one plan, it was called a forested buffer along the Van Buren Drive neighborhood. It's a bit narrow there, but I do think there could be a way to widen that, and then that might be a space where, like St. Luke's, which is a church very next to next to Eastport Shopping Center, they're managing their stormwater in that forested area, and they're taking it from the neighborhood. And there could be some opportunities for more continuous, wider strips or spaces here, and just to really portray that intention so that when the developer does come in, it is clear that that is something that the city is aiming for, and that is our ultimate goal. So I would just advocate diagrammatically. I know that, to do a quantification and all of that is a whole other exercise, and fully aware of that, but diagrammatically showing larger, either like linear or just blue areas that are more continuous and kind of show a more intentional effort to collect and manage stormwater. I think that is something that this region in particular really needs to strive for with any project.
Absolutely. I think it's a good point.
So that's really those were my main comments.
And I'm seeing a couple hands raised from Bill and Melissa. I'm not sure Melissa's is down now. So Bill, did you want to jump in? And then I have a few questions after Bill.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I did have a few questions. I know that there is some solar on the existing units and the existing property. And so I was just curious if there is any solar plan for the new units.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we haven't gotten into the building design, but I think that's a great opportunity. Particularly with the flat roofs, we can get a nice array up on top with mechanical systems. I think there's also opportunities where we have the structured parking to also, is kind of going beyond your request, but also looking at green roofs as well, where we have the structured parking. We try to, it's possible, but we try to avoid putting green roofs on wood frame buildings. But where we have those opportunities, where we have kind of that more rigid system, we always try to leverage green roofs there. But yeah, with solar, I think there's lots of opportunities to pick it up on these buildings. And particularly the community building, where, you know, if we can also get batteries to store the power there. So in the event of an emergency, we've got the batteries to help back up that system.
Right. Okay. And similar to Jenny's question regarding the numerous stormwater management facilities that are there, which is great. And also with the street trees and other tree plantings, I was just curious what the maintenance plan is for all of those facilities, because there's a lot of them there.
Yeah, it is. We will have to. We haven't gotten to that level of detail of how it gets maintained, but it's, you know, the way the state operates now. It's the new normal. So I think there's going to be some businesses that are going to be very well suited to help support the maintenance of these facilities.
Okay. And even some of the better developments that we've had in the city, one of the challenges that we've been faced as a city, and as you know, and that we've certainly seen on this commission, is that during the actual construction phase of the project, there's been numerous projects around town that have seen lots of sediment runoff and poor stormwater management practice during the actual disturbance. And especially with this project being so close to the water, I just wanted to bring that up as a concern of ours, to hopefully be able to preemptively put in really strong sediment controls while the ground
I agree with you. Yeah, I think that's really important. I've been on numerous projects that, you know, we create these beautiful stormwater management systems, and then during construction, you know, one bad storm can silt the whole thing in. So really doing our due diligence and making sure that the silting strategy, the silt fence strategy, and the whole construction phase doesn't destroy, you know, that infrastructure.
I was also curious how you would handle recycling for these several hundred units. I know we've had challenges not just with public housing, but also with, you know, condominiums and apartments, you know, private condominiums, apartments that don't do a good job of encouraging or providing facilities for residents to recycle.
Yeah, that's a really good one. At this level, it's a great detail we have to explore. I think at this point, you know, being able to provide adequate space for those components within the buildings is kind of what we have now. I think as we work with a developer, you know, looking at it, who's going to be the private service that comes in and does that service. How do they coordinate with recycling? You know, ideally, if we could make recycling at the forefront and very accessible to residents, particularly in the multifamily buildings, I think that's important too. So just making that as convenient as possible to allow them to drop off the recycling as they're walking out the door or out the stairs. I think that's important. We don't want to kind of hide that necessarily, but it does need to be coordinated with the provider, whoever's going to do the pickup once a week.
Right. I appreciate that. And I guess my last bit is just a comment. I think the connection to Truxton Park without having them to walk all the way around, I think that's a fantastic idea, and I think it will get a ton of use. So I appreciate seeing that. That was it for me.
Thanks, Bill. I definitely agree on that last point. I'm really excited to see that. So I was not aware of that potential connection until tonight. I also want to echo what Jenny said earlier. Thank you for all the work on this and the continued work. This is pretty exciting stuff. Bill already asked my question about solar panels, so good to hear that. And as my first question is about the phased construction approach, as I've been looking at some slides on the website as well as what you've been presenting, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around how what the intention is especially with what was said about the replacement units and everything else. Is the goal here to try to keep as many of these people able to live in their current structures until maybe phase one is complete and habitable, or what exactly is the process here with the phased approach from a resident perspective?
Right. So I think, the housing authority is going to have a relocation strategy that they're developing. But in terms of the physical phasing, our primary goal is to build first and then allow people to move into those spaces. Ideally, we don't want people to have to be relocated out of the neighborhood or somewhere else in the neighborhood and then move into a new facility. So again, the goal, some of the diagrams you may have seen, our phase one is really looking at developing here where that field is in the back, where the basketball court is, and the HACA office. So we want to build housing where there's no housing today, work within that footprint, develop those buildings, bring those units online, and then we can start talking about relocating residents and then starting to do a demolition of the phase two. So that's why the phasing is going to be important in this process. Also, the Spa Road site becomes really important because there's an opportunity to build and have construction kind of located off-site with minimal disturbance to the existing residents, and then really bring in a good quantity of units online before anybody has to move. So yeah, build first is kind of our strategy here.
And Matthew, if I can just jump in here, because I do want to talk about a goal versus an absolute. So yes, there is a goal to try to develop housing, to start construction on this implementation plan before anybody has to relocate. And so one, it's contingent on, are we able to sort of really truly bring in Spa Road as part of the off-site redevelopment plan? And then to the part that Matthew mentioned, this does require the housing authority offices to relocate. So that's a really big assumption that we're making. And so to the extent that the housing authority can successfully find replacement office space, someplace else, then that is possible. But I also do want to also caveat, some families will have to move offsite during this construction phase. So there is not this guarantee that nobody moves offsite. Everybody stays on site and wait for new housing, because the phasing strategy, by definition, because earlier we talked about the fact that each phase is going to be mixed income. So there's no one phase that's going to be 100% replacement units for public housing families. So that's part of the balancing act that we're looking at from an implementation approach, is that developing sufficient units early enough, but that we're not reconcentrating poverty in any one phase. So I just want to caveat it that way, and that the final phasing plan is going to be informed by the engineering work once a developer is brought on board. So this is our best assumptions right now, but obviously there's still a lot more work to be done as we move from planning to implementation, which is going to include far more engineering work that might refine this phasing plan.
Thank you for that. And as my last question is really just from a commission's perspective, what can you remind us what the next steps are and what the ask might be for us? Like, are we being asked to provide comment or support, like a statement of support to the planning commission, or I'm just not sure where you are in the next steps and what our role might be.
That's a great question, Jeremy. That's awesome. Where do we get people? Tell us what we want you to do. So I think, the beginning of this, I think Teresa mentioned, we're winding down the planning process. The Housing Authority is going to be submitting the plan to HUD, this final plan to HUD. And remember, the plan is really a series of plans, right? There is how do we redevelop the public housing site itself, right? That's the housing. There's a plan around neighborhood improvements, which include community safety and incomplete, streets improvements and bicycle network improvements and retail and new parks or improvements to parks, all of that. And then the third piece of the plan is the supportive services strategy that focuses on education and health and wellness and employment and work. So think of it as a series of 3 plans that come together. And tonight we've been focusing mostly on the built environment. So immediate next steps is that in November, the Housing Authority submits this plan to meet the obligation for the grant that they received. We were at City Council, was it last week now, or is it this week? My days are blending.
Yes.
Last week.
Last week.
And among the asks really is that, and this is where, Jeremy, your support of this will become important, is that the city officially adopts this plan as the framework for how this neighborhood is redeveloped. So that's really going to be an important one. So that's the first thing. The second big next steps is really the Housing Authority is going to need to expand its team to include a private developer that is going to be coming in with the kind of 1, deep pockets to sort of move this along, right? And then 2, enough experience in the state to be able to begin to capture some of the state tax credit, because money is going to be a big thing. This is a project that is going to cost well over $300 million. We're looking at about an 8 to 10 year sort of build out. And so in the short term, though, it's a matter of sort of standing up the pieces that we have some control on. So developer procurement, getting the city to adopt the plan, and getting the city to move on Spar Road. And Eric can speak more eloquently about where the city is at right now on kind of the work around getting Spar Road to come into the mix. So those are kind of the short term. And then the other pieces of this, and this is really important that everybody understands this, Jeremy, this land is encumbered. The Housing Authority cannot actually go and start implementation of this plan without HUD's approval. And so even though we're submitting this plan, that's a framework plan. So the Housing Authority is going to have to submit a series of other submissions to HUD to get approval of the actual demolition of a phase. And that will then be an individual phase at a time. The Housing Authority is going to prepare and get HUD approval on a relocation plan, for example. So this is why, we're pitching this. This is an 8 to 10 year strategy, because there's sort of a lot of what I would refer to kind of unsexy work that has to happen in the short term to get you to the first shovel in the ground. We have to find money. There is not a penny right now identified. And, I know we're talking with the city about what the city can do in terms of both kind of pre-development funding, but then also some of the neighborhood projects that Matthew talked about. Those are going to fall in the cities to do, for example, right? And then lastly is just kind of this continued championing of a plan like this, because it does require, the density is not insignificant, right? And I know we've been working very closely with the city to make sure it's aligned with the new comp plan and the changes that are coming, so that there is not this misalignment about this plan versus where the city is headed. And Eric has done a great job of making sure so that we align, those things. But you all can be champions of this plan, so that when there are questions asked about why this plan is important, you all are putting up your hands as well, saying this is a plan that's worthy of support. And that it's not the housing authority by itself trying to push this plan or the city, but that you all as stakeholders invested in something like this. So that's what I would say. So we've got kind of immediate next steps, and then there's sort of intermediate and longer term next steps. But take the long view here, because we're not going to be able to deliver this whole thing in, 2 to 3 years, right? And looks like Melissa, you had your hand up. You want to add to that?
Sure. I think one of the things that we talked with City Council last week was that in order to accomplish this, this has to be, project has to be fully embraced, adopted, which is a legal term, and really taking on as the city's own plan in partnership with HACA. We're not bringing a plan to you for your approval per se. We are actually creating a plan together that will have to go through numerous sets of approvals from numerous federal, state, county, and local city council entities. And so the items, like there are many great suggestions today and things that we can continue to consider as we continue our planning efforts. But actually, many of the implementation efforts are going to be performed by city staff in order to accomplish this in partnership with HACA. So for example, if there's stormwater issues, transportation, any other, a lot of the environmental measures in partnership with HACA and whatever developers are chosen. In fact, the city is involved in even the process of choosing the developer. We have city staff involved in the evaluation team. I think one of the challenges is going to be for the city to sort of wrap its mind around the fact that this is our plan. We, along with the housing authority, need to find the resources, identify resources and funding for this plan. And we need to be, flexible along the way to make any necessary changes to get to that ideal place of the things so that we can dream big, because our dreams are as limited by the amount of, funds, to be honest, that we can raise for this, because we all have very lofty goals with regards to this revitalization effort, but it will be limited by the amount of funding and also any legal barriers that we might encounter along the way. So whatever is within the city's power to alleviate, to remove administrative or legal barriers that are present for redevelopment and improvement of the neighborhoods, that's what the city can do. And not just review when items are brought to you, but start thinking of now and begin addressing now in partnership with us. Because as city staff or a particular commission may think of things that we at the Housing Authority have not thought of yet. And that's what we would rely on you to help us think through the things we need to think through. So it's a bit of a shift because it's very different from how development projects are brought to you all. Currently, usually there's a plan somewhere in process that's brought to you all for approval. This is a collaborative process, and we look forward to continue to see it develop.
Jackie, you have your hand up?
Yes, thanks, Jeremy. Hi, I haven't met everybody on the EJP team. I'm Jackie Gild. I'm the Deputy City Manager for Resilience and Sustainability. So I just want to follow up on the last part of Jeremy's question is, what can the Annapolis Environmental Commission do to influence this process, provide their comments? So I think what we're getting at is there's a number of questions been raised here tonight, and I'm sure this commission with their various expertise and background will think of more questions and comments. To whom should they direct their comments and by what date?
So this is Ray. And so I would say, Eric, can you be the conduit to the commission to get any feedback that they have and then feed it into our team So I would say direct any comments to Eric, and I would say as soon as possible, because like I mentioned, we're in the process of finalizing this framework that gets submitted. Many of the questions you all talked about are less about the framework itself, but sort of implementation related issues like the solar panels and things like that. So there will be once the developer is procured and brought on board, and once we advance to implementation, there'll be plenty of opportunities for further refinement. This is not yet a designed project. This is not yet engineered. This is a framework setting the vision and the goals for how we're going to redevelop this site. But please send your comments to Eric. If you can get them to us within a week of today, that would be really, really appreciated, as we're in the process right now of finalizing this plan to sort of complete the official planning process, but implementation is going to take many, many more years. And I think you have Eric's contact, right? I assume you do, right?
Yeah,
Eric, you know
yeah.
everybody, right?
We do. We do. So yeah, you just confirmed something for me. We haven't done any design yet, so we will need to find money for the 300 million, I think you said, would be for design, engineering, permitting, and construction, demolition and construction, correct?
Yes, that's the whole kit and caboodle.
Yeah.
But we're going to bite this up into bite-sized pieces, one phase at a time. So
Yeah.
The first phase will just be, you know, what it ends up being. But yes.
Okay, and in the remaining time we have, I just was hoping that Eric could expand a little bit more on the Spa Roadside, how that ties in. It's actually part of CNI, and you know, this because this is the first time I'm hearing about it, Eric, because I didn't hear all of the presentation the other day.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk more about that. I apologize I couldn't be here earlier, but I heard most of the presentation and I've heard it before. So yeah, I've been tag teaming the management with Teresa. We work closely together in the Department of Planning and Zoning. And yeah, I just want to commend the consultant team for continuing to work through this project and answer all the questions. So with the Spa Road site, you know, we know there's a documented history of contamination on this site. Nevertheless, you know, the site today, a portion of it would be a suitable location for residential housing in the future. And so that's kind of guiding the environmental testing that we have to do to understand what kind of remediation is needed to make that site suitable, clean for development. And our Department of Public Works is handling that portion of the project. They have a contractor that they're going to be soon bring under contract to do the phase 1 and phase 2 environmental investigations. Portion of the site has already been investigated. That's the former Weems Whalen Field. And that has been determined to be permanent recreation space. So that portion would never be developed. And I believe there's already a cap on that site. But the rest of the Spa Road, former Public Works facility, does need comprehensive subsurface testing. And you kind of have to sort of design the testing regime. You have to understand what the future use might be. So, you know, if we said, oh, there'll never be housing, it's a terrible site for housing, we would only test, you know, maybe a few feet below the surface for, you know, future ball fields or something. But because it's on a major, you know, corridor, it's close to a lot of amenities, public facilities. I mean, that's why it makes sense as a housing site. And that's why we want to go far deeper underneath the current grade to test the conditions underground and understand what's there and what kind of remediation would be needed. So my understanding is that it's going to be an 18-month process for the environmental investigation, at which point, you know, the results of that would be shared with the Maryland Department of the Environment, as is a customary process. And then a remediation action plan would be developed based on the determined appropriate use for the site. And a contractor would be brought on to do that remediation, and we'd have to find a way to pay for that, whatever the cost would be. So there are quite a few things ahead, with the Spa Road site before we understand, the full timeline for developing it. But the Weems Whalen Field site is, there is a separate project for that to make that usable again as a recreation space. So that is proceeding on a separate timeline. But I think what we saw in that sketch earlier with the Spa Road site is just a very preliminary look at what amount of housing might be appropriate for that site. It's a relatively small footprint that is envisioned for that housing, given the overall size of the Spa Road site. There was some additional reforestation along the tributary that was shown, and we're really trying to pull back, where that development footprint might be, given that there's critical area headwaters to the Spa Creek that Matthew mentioned, and we're making a lot. I mean, this is in the comprehensive plan draft as well. We've gotten a lot of comments on it, and so we're making some clarifications there too, just to be crystal clear that there's an environmental process here that has to happen prior to any development plans, and that's the way we're going to move forward with it. And it also applies to this, the city gas station is there, and my understanding is there's a plan to phase that out, and so that's part of the testing as well. I mean, the city Department of Public Works already does weekly leak tests on that city gas station, and that documentation is available, and but that's also part of the site that we're talking about. So hope that
Hey,
helps
Eric, can you
clarify the
can you
process
send
there.
Eric, can you send Racine? I don't know if it's these slides or if there's something more so that the commission can base their comments and questions off of it.
Yeah, I think that should be fine. Sure.
And then she can share it with the
I
commission.
don't know if it was mentioned earlier, but yeah, I don't know if it was mentioned earlier, but the whole planning process has been made available through a dedicated website called eastportcni.org. I will put that in the chat. I can find the link to that chat.
I don't think we have a chat.
Okay. That's fine. Yeah, eastportcni.org. It's a very robust website where we've been kind of documenting the entire planning process. And I think it's under the resources tab on that. There's basically a running archive of every presentation and event that we did, and lots of PowerPoints there. We'll send this presentation to you as well, but that's where we would typically put this, just to sort of let folks know that this is another presentation. But the few other things I just wanted to say, and I don't know if there are other comments from the commissioners, but the way I think about this plan, it's been said several times already that, we're very preliminary here. It's a concept. A lot can get refined once there's a developer on board. I think that the way I thought about it is we have to send a plan to HUD that is believable, and that has community support, which I think it does at this point, just frankly because of the community process we've had behind this. It's very different than it's very different than a typical developer project, like as was mentioned, where plan comes to your commission and you're asked to kind of approve it or give it a recommendation, and there's usually a lot of refinement that needs to happen from when the developer brings the plan in, and it might be really far off from what the community expects or envisions. But I think in this case, because we we already worked with a very diverse group of residents and other stakeholders. I think there was a lot of compromise already made into this plan, in terms of, the appropriateness of the different housing types and the amount of open space, the connection to Hawkins Cove. And I think some things are obvious and kind of unobjectionable. I think that the Hawkins Cove component is really one of those things that it's really hard to argue against that. I mean, that's just a huge environmental asset to this project. But I think a lot of what you shared tonight are great considerations for this project to make it better once we get into those refinements. And so I think they're good things to have on record and potentially work into the plan if there's a appropriate place for that, because I think they're all very, very relevant and doable. So I just wanted to clarify that. And to Melissa's comments, it does have to be a city project. We have to embrace it. We have to think of this as in a way it's like another city dock project. I mean, this is a huge 30-acre site. It's a huge asset to the city to have. It's sort of like, I think about how Eastport has evolved historically. It was really predominantly working class community for generations. And this is really like the last bastion of affordability in Eastport. So what we're doing is trying to preserve that, but turn it into a more thriving, sustainable community that's not just a concentration of poverty surrounded by wealth, and that's really the heart of this. It needs to be more integrated with the city, and resources have to be provided to residents to ensure that they're successful. And, that's really what gets me excited about this project and all the opportunities in it. So that's all I had to share at this point.
Thanks for that. And I know we are kind of running out on our time to our meeting. I don't think we have a lot of old business, so we can, but we should still reserve some time at the end to get to that. But Marianne and Linda, we haven't heard from you, so I just wanted to check in if you had any questions or comments.
Linda here, and I'm just still learning. So it all sounds good. I'm familiar with the Eastport neighborhood. I even have friends that live on Van Buren. So, and I'm over there at the post office every day. So, it's interesting.
So Marianne here, I this is really the first time that I've spent any time with the project. So I want to dig in and come back later with any additional comments or questions.
And Marianne, if I might add, tonight, like I said, we focus on the built environment, but if you were to peruse the website, for example, and look at the draft of the full plan, there's a lot more details on it, for example, on the people element or on the neighborhood element. So I do want to just encourage you, if you wanted to just review some of the additional materials, because tonight we just saw a fairly narrow focus on the built environment on site, but there's way much more to this plan than that. So have fun.
And that information that's under that eastportcni.org.
Yes,
that's
yes.
Where we can. Okay, great.
Yes, there's a draft, and
Thank you.
also I'm using this plug. Invite you all to come. We're having a final community meeting. Oh my gosh, I'm having a senior moment now. It is
November 2nd.
November 2nd at I think 6 o'clock. It's going to be at the church in the neighborhood where we've had our other meetings.
Eastport United Methodist.
Eastport United
It's
Methodist
the church next to the firehouse. Yeah.
So if you're able to come out and come chat with us some more, this is our final public engagement to sort of wrap up the planning process. But if you can't make it, just pop on the website and peruse the draft of the plan. So you get there's a lot more details there about the non-built environment elements.
Thank you for that.
Something
And
else we're going to have at that event.
Go ahead, Eric.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to say something else we're going to have at that event is also an update on the Hawkins Cove project, which is kind of happening in parallel to this as well. I mean, it's coordinated with this larger project, but we have a separate design team trying to advance that project right now, and they're wrapping up their site analysis work, and so they'd be sort of kicking off the concept design phase for that. And so we've already talked to them about developing some materials to share and try to solicit some ideas from folks at that event as they get into the design phase for Hawkins Cove.
Thank you for that. And yeah, since we are just, I guess, hearing about the framework, and that's really the immediate point of approval and adoption that's going to be coming to the city in the shorter term. And we'll definitely be talking about this again, I'm from the sounds of it, as the design and engineering and everything else comes together. I'm sure this will come back to the commission many times. So if there are any questions or comments, I guess just in the sake of the 1 week kind of turnaround, we should just do that individually to Eric, because we'll certainly have continued opportunities on some of the details we tend to focus on at this commission, like the stormwater and everything else that I think have yet to really be fleshed out and determined. So, but I really appreciate the briefing and just hearing more about this, because yeah, we'll talk more about it. And thank you all.
This is Bill. Eric, I had a quick question for you. That field at the Spa Road site, the existing field, I was always under the impression that that was owned by St. Mary's. Are you saying it's a city property?
It is. I mean, I know why you thought I thought it was too at some point in my life. I mean, it was long time St. Mary's high school field, but no, it's a city-owned property, and we definitely, it's our responsibility to kind of get it back into use. So
Yeah. So I'm a youth sports coach, and I can tell you we are in desperate need of decent playing fields in the city. We just redid the Upper Bates Field, or somebody did, and it's already completely torn up just from overuse. So I was just curious if you could, if I could just put a bug in your ear that, if that field could even be just, without, lining or, goals or whatever, if it could just be, the gate open so that the folks using the Bates complex could go use that field as well. I don't know how much of a possibility that is, but I'm always looking over at that field like, wow, there's this beautiful field. Too bad we can't use it.
Well, I'll definitely share that with our Rec and Parks director. And I know it's a huge priority for her to get that field in use again. And I can tell you right now, our Department of Public Works staff they're actually looking at, from a permitting perspective, synthetic turf versus natural grass, and all, obviously we're close. We're in the critical area. There's issues that have to be resolved as we do the design on that. So they're looking at various options, and there may be some way to have an interim use before the construction starts to kind of make it more finished. But I'll definitely let her know that's a concern.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And as the newly appointed chair, I will take it as my personal mission to have us wrap up our meetings as close to 9 as possible. But we haven't met and had a quorum in a few months. So thanks again to everyone that came and presented to us today. If you have to drop off, we won't be offended. But
Thank you, Matthew.
We can drop off, the consultant team can drop off now.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we can drop off. You don't need me for anything else.
Yeah, thank
Eric,
you. Thanks
yeah,
for
I
your
don't know.
comments.
Okay.
I don't know about Eric,
Thanks,
but
everybody.
it's just a question. I guess
Well,
to
what
really
is that?
Jackie and Racine as Eric, I'm not sure if any of the old business pertains to you or not. Because we haven't had a quorum and met since, was it July or
It
June?
was
So,
July. Well, the
July.
last meeting was in June. The July meeting, there was not enough, there weren't enough members present.
right,
There
and I
was
wasn't at
no-
June,
There
so
was no July meeting and there was no meeting in August, and that was a decision made. That you
Right.
wouldn't be
Let me
meeting.
just
So
ask
let-
Eric something real quick. Eric, so if the commission were to provide, so we really are just gonna need to comment on the broad framework of the idea of this project. We don't have to get down into the weeds of, you know, we should have microgrids and solar here and
Right.
stormwater here and a green roof here yet, do we? Or are you looking for that?
I think those kind of comments about like the opportunities, you know, to like push the envelope in certain ways, or the things that shouldn't be an afterthought. I mean, I thought in particular the question about the construction phase runoff. I mean, we will definitely be taking that seriously, but I mean, I think that kind of thing for the team, the plan that we have put together. I mean, you saw a lot of it tonight, but I think there is a section where it's sort of like, you know, special considerations for, you know, the future design refinements. And I think that you saw a slide about the sustainability measures. And I mean, I think that was just like a few bullet points from kind of what the design team, the planning team has been considering. But I mean, I think any of the things that were mentioned tonight, and anything else that you think is sort of an opportunity here should be shared, and we can try to get that in.
And
as just a
I'm thinking that it would be more like 2 weeks before we got anything to you. It sounds like they're not submitting till later in November if you're still having a meeting in early November.
yeah. I mean, realistically, I understand that might be that's definitely a more realistic request. So
Okay.
yeah, they're just trying to finalize things. I'm sorry this meeting didn't happen till now. I guess obviously that August recess is an issue we had to get around, but I'm glad we got to you at least. I think I think that the developer that would eventually be brought on board is going to be a developer that has experience doing this type of project, the scale, this kind of complexity, the mixed income aspect and mixed use, that, you know, the spaces that are into this plan that aren't just housing. So that we're going to have to be very careful and, you know, bring on the right developer partner, but the city is going to still be very, very involved. I think the other part that the city is going to be specifically where the city is not just in sort of helping to permit this project eventually and make sure that the design refinements make sense, but a lot of the public infrastructure work will ultimately probably be funded by the city, not necessarily with like our tax dollars, but through bonds, through grants, and other funding opportunities that we have access to. So when you see like that Madison Street corridor, the sort of green street that was described, I mean, that's a major change to the street today for the better. It's going to be very expensive. There'll be a lot of underground work and the park spaces. I mean, I think that large central open space has an opportunity to connect to Hawkins Cove. And so a lot of these things I think make sense for the city to take some responsibility for. And then the management of them ultimately will probably be some kind of a shared thing. I mean, it's, with a lot of these larger developments, you know, the property owner does take on a lot of the management of stormwater, but I think with the public right of ways, you know, and some of the park spaces, it might end up being the city. I think that will have to be resolved, but you know, I think there are a lot of details to still work out. So calling this a framework is probably the best, most appropriate way to describe it.
Yeah. Well, if a statement before November would be helpful as far as the commission weighing in and just maybe highlighting things we like or support in particular about the framework, we can do that. Maybe put something together and then talk about it at our October meeting. Just in the interest of time, we need to move on. And I do want to ask Jackie and Racine, since it's been so long since we've met, you might have a long list of things that we would call old business. So I know we don't have time to get into probably even a small fraction of that stuff. So is there anything time sensitive that you do want to raise now? And then maybe if you have typed notes or a typed list, you can just quickly shoot us out an email this week. I don't want to ask you to do more work. I'm just saying, if you have a list already typed up and can email it to us, that might be better for any old business or updates that we should hear, but I just want to focus on any time sensitive things in our last few minutes.
There's nothing else really time sensitive, but what I have done regularly in the past, we just haven't met in a while, is provide the resilience and sustainability projects list update, which I was working on this week, got caught up in every other things. The environmental steering committee did not meet, so I didn't provide it to them. I would plan on completing it this week and just sending it out to everybody. So that's something we update every month, and we will send out to this commission every month. So ahead of the meetings, so you can review it at your leisure and see if there's anything that we need to bring up during a meeting. And if we don't get to it, that you can email me or Racine or call us in between and we can address. But there's nothing else pressing right now. I'd say we should focus on getting some comments in on the CNI. Because we already commented on the comp plan and
right.
The comment period is done.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
Right,
I could just also comment on comp plan if you want me to, but next steps, but.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have time for that. I know since the comment period is done, maybe would it be appropriate next month to maybe hear an update or summary or kind of.
Sure. I was just going to say that the comment period is over. All we're doing at this point is formulating the proposed updates to the draft based on the comments we received. And we're going back to the Planning Commission at their next meeting, which is October 12th, to share those kind of tabulated proposed changes, get their approval, and then kind of get released to spend about 4 to 6 weeks making the updates to the draft plan, go back to the Planning Commission, ideally before Thanksgiving, and get their approval on the changes to, the updated draft plan. And then ideally be able to have a draft plan that the Planning Commission is comfortable with to submit to the City Council so they can start their adoption and review process in the new year. That's essentially what we're working towards. There'll be other opportunities for public comment and testimony once it's at City Council. So that's
Makes
the
sense.
process moving forward.
Thank you, Eric. And Racine, what do you have?
Oh, I was just, I literally was going to ask Eric to do a quick update on the comp plan and the next step. So there you go.
All right, thank you. And I guess in the interest of wrapping this up, I do also want to say thank you for making me chair. I realized I didn't actually say thanks earlier, so I do appreciate the support, even though it almost feels like a subtle trap I've walked into based on how he's like maybe a little too easy. But I'm thankful for this opportunity and to have Jenny as vice chair, and we'll the support of the rest of the commissioners moving forward. So with that, if I can just move to adjourn,
So moved.
I'll second myself. And yeah, and all in favor, say aye.
I
Aye.
Aye.
All right, appreciate that. And we're adjourned for the evening.